It took me about 40 seconds to decide whether or not I wanted to do a video on the new Process Audio Rockruepel COMP.TWO plugin or not. This plugin is no joke. Many describe the hardware unit, the analog COMP.TWO, as one of the few new classics. And regardless how close it is to the original unit, which it is, this plugin sounds freaking awesome. So without further ado, let's hear how it sounds. Alright, the analog Rockruepel COMP.TWO is an absolute beast of a unit, an all-tube vari-mu compressor with Souther transformers, VMA capacitors, the best components available, built with no corners cut. Process Audio recreated this high-end boutique compressor in a digital form, and it might be one of the classiest, also most versatile, not only for being a vari-mu compressor, but in general, compressor plugins out there. It's got a lot of mojo, but you can control it. The saturation on board is never brittle. Quick look at the interface and the functions, because everything is pretty much in front of you, but there's a couple of things to pay attention to. We have input and output knobs, which can be linkable. So as you turn the input up, the output gets compensated automatically. We have a mix knob, we have a threshold, attack and release, as in every other compressor. We have a side chain that can go flat, 54, 74, 110, and 160. The compressor can be used in stereo, dual mono, or mid-side. And we have up here two toggles, two functions that make this compressor unique. One, compressor or amp only toggle. This, as you can see, when you put it in amp only, grays out the threshold, the attack, and the release, and only leaves active input and output, side chain, and a stereo dual mono mid-side switch. Because you can decide to take away the compression altogether and simply use the circuit, the tube circuit, as a saturator and color box. That's really cool. And then we have the second toggle switch, transformer on or off. I really appreciated they put the option of taking the transformers off, because I gotta be honest, many times, especially for mastering purposes, I like the transformers off, but it's there if you want it. We have a saturation indicator here. You will see a red light will show up if I drive the input. That gives you a visual representation of how hard are you hitting the input of the plugin, especially if you're using amp only, you don't see the gain reduction, or maybe even if you are using the compressor, you have a very low threshold. This red light will give you an indication of how hard are you hitting the input. We have external sidechain and also the option to listen to that external sidechain. We have oversampling, which for this test I will keep at 2, because I notice it sounds much better than default. Definitely that's where I will keep it at minimum, especially the saturation sounds much better, and you can go higher if you want. Then we have a visualizer button which opens this panel here if you want a visual representation of not only the compression, and I will show you here. So you have the curve, you can take a look, so to speak, at the release, but you also have a gain reduction metering, very precise input and output metering as well. And here at the top, a couple of cool settings. For example, here you can decide what do you want as a VU background. You can also right click here and you see you have 3 choices. That's very cool. The refresh rate, the master type, but here we also have the console. So if you have multiple instances of the COMP.TWO open in your project, they will show up here in this panel, and you can quickly control all the parameters without going to that specific track. So very, very cool if you do group compressions. Maybe you have one of these on the drums, one of these on the bass, or on the mix bus and vocals. Also really love how they implemented the 2 sliding panels, so you really have all the controls here. Kudos to Process Audio just for that. The GUI is resizable, so without further ado, let's start. I will start with some full mixes for this.
Heal me.
Okay, so this is just the first pass with this mix, and as you can see, I'm keeping the input and output linked, so there is really zero level difference between with and without, but you can definitely hear the subtle and classy color and added harmonics, especially in the mid-range. Not only that, but you can also hear the very transparent and musical action of the compression itself being a Vari mute. This is not a plugin that throws smoke at your face and wows you for the first 10 seconds with added brightness or added volume or whatever weird trickery some processors try to catch your attention. This is actually close to the analog because it's subtle. Because a high quality boutique compressor like this, yes, it has colors and we can drive it hard there. I was barely hitting the red light here in the saturation indicator. But high-end gear like that has high headroom and they sound open and they just add a little extra layer and density to the material. If you notice when I put the transformers on, to me, and this is just my opinion, it becomes a little too dirty and I feel a thin layer of like haziness in the low mid-range and mid-range as well. This is to say, not that the transformers shouldn't be used, it's simply not for everything, okay? At least for me. And it also depends how hard are you driving it. So I'm just gonna do another couple of mixes here. Let's drive the amp now only. Okay, please notice something. So I am going to show you where this mix peak here. Okay, we are about minus 8.9, let's say minus 9 peak level, okay? If we drive this amp here. All right, just with the subtle saturation, we are gaining over 1 dB with the same perceived level, actually slightly more because there's this richness in the mid-range. I'm gonna exaggerate it now. Okay, so I'm exaggerating obviously, and we will try this on single tracks, which is probably more appropriate for the amp only function, but you can see how much headroom you can gain just running it through the circuit, so to speak, the virtual circuit. Let's keep compressing with different settings on this. What I love about it is that it keeps the integrity of the original material. It's not overly colored. The action of the compressor is extremely natural. even though I'm compressing a lot, because this is a full mix. I'm compressing over 4 dB. But you can hear how it doesn't really mess up with the balance of the mix. It doesn't really mess up with the dynamic too much, as in it kind of maintains the groove and the flow that the original dynamic has. And that's a quality of the Varimu design, because they have a variable ratio and other things. But it is quite impressive. Let's try another song.
Big pretender, so me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Ulterior agenda, so me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Bad vibes sender, me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Man, I go like we no member, but them devious ways that me dey condemn. Well, me no care if a friend or so-called brothers. Me find out, say them know how we climb up the ladder. Fit power with them again, me nah go bother. Link up with clean-hearted stranger, me right.
Please pay attention, especially on this song, to the vocals and what's around it, meaning what's around it in the frequency range. So all the mid-range, the hi-hats, and all the instrumentation around the vocals, that's the added extra harmonics in the mid-range that I was talking about, and that is so very subtle, and yet it makes a difference.
Big pretender, so me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Ulterior agenda, so me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Bad vibes sender, me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Man, I go like we no member, but them devious ways that me dey condemn. Well, me no care if a friend or so-called brothers. Me find out, say.
Let's put the transformer in.
Big pretender, so me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Ulterior agenda, so me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Bad vibes sender, me take when me sell from them. Take when me sell from them. Man, I go like we no member, but them devious ways that me dey condemn. Well, me no care if a friend.
Okay, so in this case, you can hear the transformer here is better. We get something at the top end, a little more color. I'm not mad at it on this track. Let's try a bass heavy track.
Ain't no sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is tainted. Should've been out by now, running out of patience, losing my mind now. Feel like I gotta watch my back, I'm a danger. Used to be homie, some changed up, hard working, now to say look, just caked up. I made up my mind, I gotta get the bag. Shorty, I am not the one, so don't you get attached. And where I am from, it's like we never had. So if I gotta split, then I get the better half. And I just paint the picture, and I ain't never rap.
And again, if you pay attention to the peak level, we are actually lower. You hear how on a song like this, in which we have, you can see the kick drum has a tall peak, right? Very, very common situation. We can kind of maintain the kick punch, which without the compressor, it stands too tall and it kind of sounds too far from the rest of the music, right? But now we're bringing the mid-range and all the instruments closer, so to speak. It's not just closer as a nominal level, it's closer to our ears. If you pay attention without the compressor, how close gets the kick drum, and then everything else like the vocals and all the other things are kind of far. And with this compressor on, everything is where it's supposed to be, in a more confined and controlled space. But most important, it has what we refer as glue, because that's exactly what it does. So without first.
Ain't no sunshine on this side of town. You could get lost and never be found. Fuck it, I'ma ride out till my fucking time's out. So I gotta make it. It's do or die now, and my soul is tainted. Should've been out by now, running out of patience, losing my mind now. Feel like I gotta watch my back, I'm a danger. Used to be homie, some changed up, hard working, now to say look, just caked up. I made up my mind, I gotta get the bag. Shorty, I am not the one, so don't you get attached. And where I am from, it's like we never had. So if I gotta split, then I get the better half. And I just paint the picture, and I ain't never rap. Got my mind on my money, money on my mind.
Again, this compressor does not try to impress you with major and massive changes. Actually, you also hear how the transformers on some material is more audible and obvious than on others. On this one, for example, is very subtle. But I want to try this on some single tracks, and I'm going to start with drums because I really want to hear this amp only with and without the transformers. And on drums, it's going to be easier for you to hear the type of saturation that it has. You hear how round it is at the top, and actually feels like the amp has a really gentle and smooth saturation curve. If it was a clipper, imagine this as a very smooth and soft type of clipping. This is gonna be great to sit things in a mix when they are too sharp. Very, very common with computer-based music. Let's try the transformers now. Okay, so you hear exactly what I was hearing in those mixes. We have more saturation in the low end, more saturation in the lows, but also a little less low end, okay? Probably if we were to analyze this, we would see like a slight cut in the really sub range or a slight slope. There are many transformers that do that. For example, if you engage the transformers on the Fatso, you have a little bit of shave off the really sub range. Same for the 80 plus. So it's common for transformers to do this. Many people assume a transformers will always give you more low end, which sometimes it's the case, sometimes it's not. Sometimes what happens also is they shift the energy. So they mic cut a little bit of sub range in the 30 hertz or 26 hertz, or sometimes higher, 40. But they will give you more power in the audible range, like 90 or 100 or something like that. So in this case, I'm personally not a big fan of the transformer on, especially when you drive it, because to me it muddies the water a little bit. So I'm very happy that I can keep it off when I want, but that doesn't mean it can't be useful on other things. So let's go back to transformers off. Let's engage the compressor and let's start compressing this drum so we can hear the characteristics of the action of the compressor. Okay, who said that Varimuse can be snappy or can't be mean and aggressive? The Rockruepel COMP.TWO is actually one very good example of how a Varimuse compressor that is usually seen and used for light and gentle compressions can be this versatile and can actually be smashing and mean and react very fast to the material like we are doing here. I'm gonna play with the attack to better understand the range of this comp. This is actually quite unique. You see my settings. I'm using an extremely slow attack, kind of fast medium release, and I'm smashing this with 10, 12 plus dB of compression. The result shouldn't sound like this. It shouldn't sound like I'm bringing this much detail and low level information like I'm doing now, because I'm only compensating for 2 dB. Listen to the hi-hat. The groove on the hi-hat is really cool. Well, this thing can be absolutely mean, and that's great because, again, Vari-Mu compressors, it probably excels in vocal compression, two-bus compression, and groups, and piano, very complex elements. And yet it can also do this. Really, really love it. Let's try a couple of vocals. So I want to hear that saturation on vocals.
Now the day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here to get me through it all. Let my guard down, now you pull the rug. I was getting kinda used to being someone you loved. Now the day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here to get me through it all. Let my guard down, now you pull the rug. I was getting kinda used to being someone you loved.
That sounds spectacular. This is one of the most organic saturation to date, and I actually on vocals kind of like the Transformers. What it does at the top end, I'm still not a fan of what it does at the low mid-range, but the saturation alone is worth the price of admission. Let's start compressing this.
Now the day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here to get me through it all. Let my guard down, now you pull the rug. I was getting kinda used to being someone you loved. Now the day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here to get me through it all. Let my guard down, now you pull the rug. I was getting kinda used to being someone you loved.
Wow, man, this thing is serious. Two things. I love the fact that the saturation obviously comes before the compression, because if we didn't, when we compress these tall peaks here,
into nightfall,
we would have less saturation.
Into nightfall.
And we don't. We have the same amount of saturation. Of course, the volume right now is higher because we are not compressing, which is exactly how would I want it, because at least me, I always set up the input first and I understand how hard I want to hit it and how much saturation I want from the box itself. And then I start compressing. So if I set my input and saturation level by ear and then I compress, if the saturation comes after, it would, at the moment that I'm compressing, take away the signal from the input and not saturate as much. So I would have to redo the gain stages. So that's really cool. Second, this thing has a crazy fast release, which I love for a Vari-Mu, because you can always go slow. I mean, it can go slower than I would ever use. So the fact that I have much more range in the fast area, that's really something that I like for a Vari-Mu.
Now the day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here to get me through it all. Let my guard down, now you pull the rug. I was getting kinda used to being someone you loved.
This sounds really cool, and I love how it's soft on the top end. So this is definitely not a compressor you want to use to give like a top end boost of some sort, which many processors tend to do, but I want to say many others do it in a very artificial way. This definitely helps you when you have harsh material, computer-based music, loops that are probably not that great, vocals that are too bright, and the action of the compression is extremely natural and musical. We can take a look at this now here because, for example, this vocal here, we can see it is extremely dynamic, so I'm knocking down a lot.
Now the day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here to get me through it all. Let my guard down, now you pull the rug. I was getting kinda used to being someone you loved. Now the day bleeds into nightfall.
Let's just hear this first passage.
Now the day bleeds into nightfall. Now the day bleeds into nightfall.
That's without the transformers, because now with the transformers we have this added low mid-range.
Now the day bleeds into nightfall, and you're not here to get me through it all.
Okay, so the character of the compressor is very clear here. Subtle softening of the top end, extremely musical and organic compression. If you add the transformers, you have this extra color in the low mid-range. Depending on the material, also audible on other areas. Personally not a big fan, but keep it off and you got nothing to worry about. The saturation when you drive the input is world class, and we have a very unusual versatility in the attack and release for a Varimu. Definitely well done. Let's do acoustic guitar last, because I feel this video is much longer than was intended, but I'm generally impressed and I'm having fun playing with this one. You can hear on single tracks, it's easier to hear this added body and low mid-range, even without the transformers. It's just the color of the box, also because there's this softening of the top end. This is a really cool surprise. I did not see this coming, and I think Process Audio did a great job with the Rockruepel Compressor 2. The link is gonna be in the info box down below. If you like this video, please don't forget to leave a like. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. And if you like the content, please consider using the super thanks and support the channel. But most important, if you really want to learn how to mix and master professionally, click the join button down here, access the already big and always growing library of full mixing courses, start to finish, mastering courses on many different genres, and a lot more. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Stay safe. See you next time.
Hands on my neck, hands grip my throat. Lift me up, man, take control. Heart is so gone, my tight, don't you know?